hounds, chase ghosts, come sleep, watch out, demons are coming, run, sleep, hide, spirits, ghosts, hide, demons, hounds, ghosts, demons are coming.
Welcome home, my little hellhounds. Tonight we have 3 scary stories to sink our hellish teeth into, all written by the very talented MTP6921. I will leave a link to their stories below. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you're new, and don't forget to like the video, as this really helps the channel. Also, make sure to click that bell icon so you get notified every time I upload. If you have any scary stories you want narrated on the channel, then submit them to Reddit r/homeofscares. I will put the link in the description, and follow me on Twitter at homeofscares. Now, let's get right into it. If the airport wasn't so empty, I wouldn't have paid attention to the wandering girl. I'm 29 and fairly healthy, so flying during the pandemic didn't scare me, and the prices of flights were so cheap that they were hard to pass up. I booked a round-trip flight from JFK to Los Angeles for $200, which was really cheap. I spent a week sightseeing whatever was opened, like hiking up towards the Hollywood sign and just cruising Beverly Hills. Then I headed back to the airport. I have never seen such a large airport almost completely empty. My flight was delayed because the plane hadn't arrived from weather-related issues. I had at least 2 hours to occupy my time at the airport. I decided to get some steps in and walk through the different tunnels. If you have ever been to the Los Angeles airport, then you probably know of the underground hallways that stretch at least 100 yards each that connect tunnels 5, 6 and 7. It is 7 p.m. at night and the tunnels are extremely creepy. There is no one around besides an occasional airline employee. I'm having second thoughts on walking, but I really want to get in my 5 miles today. The hallways are just blank walls with an occasional mural of the Wright brothers or Hollywood ephemera. I have been walking for at least 5 minutes and I haven't seen a single soul. I now know why the airline companies are close to going bankrupt. As I make a turn into one hallway, I see a smaller figure in the distance, which is slowly walking towards me. I start to make out that it is a young girl, no older than 12. She is wearing a long dress and has curly brown hair. She definitely doesn't look like one of the Valley girls or goth girls that I saw around Hollywood. The best way to describe her would be wholesome looking. As she got closer, I can tell she is visibly upset. Being that I'm a 29-year-old guy, I feel reluctant asking her if she's okay. I don't know if she's lost, so I just stop and say, "Hey, are you okay?" She responds, "I'm looking for my mom." I say, "Where did you see her last?" She replied, "I don't know. I was on a plane with her, then I fell asleep." Everything after that feels foggy to me. I then said, "Let's look for security or the police. I'm sure they can help." We walk down the hallway together, and I say, "Where did you fly from?" The young girl responds, "I'm from Wisconsin, and we flew to California from Milwaukee." I said, "Wow, that's a pretty far trip." She said, "Yeah, we are meeting my dad here, who is producing a TV show." I respond, "Wow, that's pretty cool." The young girl seems a little less upset after talking with me. I'm completely amazed walking down these hallways in the second busiest airport in the country and not seeing a single person. We both take the escalator to head towards Terminal 6. As we go up the escalator, I see a policeman. I tell him about the girl missing her mother, and he asks me, "What girl are you talking about?" As I turn around, I realize that she just vanished. I scratch my head and wonder if she possibly didn't come up the escalator with me. The policeman is a bit confused, and he looks at me as if he was trying to determine if I was crazy or not. He says, "Okay, we'll keep our eyes out for her." Then I decide to get as far away from the policeman as possible from the embarrassment I was feeling. I go back down the escalator and head towards Terminal 7. I walk down the long, empty hallway, and I don't see the girl or anyone else. I know I talked with that girl, but I realise if the cops cared that much, they would look at the security cameras that are about every 10 feet. I got to Terminal 7, which looked like it wasn't in service, with all the stores and restaurants being shut down. I head into the bathroom and wash my face off. I get a towel to dry my face, and as I look in the mirror, I see the young girl. My heart skips about 10 beats from being shocked and surprised. I say, "What the hell? Where did you go? This is the men's room. You can't be in here." She starts crying, and I say, Okay, let's get out of the bathroom." This time I tell her to just sit and wait for an employee to walk by. I stay with her so she doesn't run off again. As we sit and wait, I ask her name, and she tells me Annabelle. I then ask her what show her father was producing, and she said the Pacific Coast Sunset. I respond, "Huh, I never heard of it. Is it new? The girl responded, yes, it hasn't made it to television yet. As I sit and wait for someone to walk by, I realise that my flight is going to take off in 40 minutes. I explain to the girl that I need to head towards Terminal 5 right now and she should follow me. We both head back down the long hallway as quickly as possible, and at the end of the hallway I see a man dressed in slacks, a white shirt with a tie, overalls, and he's smoking a cigar. As we get closer, Annabelle runs towards him and says, "Daddy." Then they both hug each other. I quickly say, "Oh great. Bye Annabelle, I have to catch my flight." I make my way into Terminal 5 Gate 52 and the flight attendant gives me an attitude as she was about to shut the door to the jet bridge to get onto the aeroplane. I get on the plane and find my seat. I sit down and try to digest the encounter with Annabelle and her father. I was amazed his smoking didn't set off the fire alarms. I take out my phone as I have a couple of minutes still to use Google as the plane taxis the runway. Out of curiosity, I look up the soon-to-be TV show, The Pacific Coast Sunset, just for the heck of it. After searching for a while, I'm at a loss for words after I click on the Google link because the show was cancelled after just one pilot episode. Here's the kicker. The pilot episode aired in 1963 and the show was scrapped because the lead producer, Frank Gutling, hung himself after his wife Julia and daughter Annabelle died in a plane wreck. How I saved Newfoundland from a Viking invasion, but nobody believes me. I have one of the easiest jobs in the world. My job is to ensure the gasoline-powered generator keeps the lighthouse visible for boats and ships off the coast of St. John's, Newfoundland, Canada. At one time, working in a lighthouse was much more labour intensive. However, with modern technology, my only job is to ensure the generator for the lighthouse has enough gasoline. I spend most of my days painting. I found the one job that will pay me indirectly for something I love doing. I work on a small island that is only about a mile in diameter. There's no one else on the island besides birds and rodents. The main island of St. John is a 2-mile boat ride where I go once a month to get food and my painting supplies. Today was just another beautiful mid-September day. I was surprised to hear over the CB radio that a storm was heading this way towards Newfoundland. Because I live in the middle of the ocean, storms and strong winds are almost a regular occurrence. But today was a beautiful day. Before going to bed, I made sure the generator had enough fuel. Then I drifted off to sleep. At about 10 p.m, I sleep at the base of the lighthouse on a cosy twin-size bed. At about 2 a.m, I was awakened by the most horrific storm that I have ever experienced since I've taken this job 15 years ago. It was like I was on the inside of a jet engine. I thought for sure the lighthouse was going to topple over. At about 2:15 a.m, the whole top of the lighthouse had flew off. I can hear the violent waves crash within feet of my bed. I feel like I'm on a submarine that has just been torpedoed. I have nowhere to run. The heavy rain, strong winds, and crashing waves are constants. I know within seconds this lighthouse will be toppled and I will drown in the ocean. I throw myself under my bed. The 80 square foot room I'm in is completely dark. I continually yell out, "Please God, no, please no, help, please God." Then, as if someone turned off the switch, the storm went away. At 5:30 a.m, I went outside, the sun starting to come up. The island had been completely destroyed. Whatever vegetation was here is gone now. I look at the lighthouse and I'm amazed I survived, considering how much damage it suffered. From a distance, St. John's was completely dark. I could only imagine how many fatalities there must have been on that island. I attempt to use the CB radio to call for help, but I receive no answer. I figure it will take some time before someone comes to rescue me, so I decide to start to clean up outside. I first check on the generator, which is fine, but the whole top of the lighthouse has been hurled into the ocean. As I start to pick up debris, I see an odd sight in the distance. I squint my eyes to make sure I'm actually seeing what I'm seeing. There are sailing vessels in the water, too many to count, which are no more than 10 miles away. They are sailing in a coordinated fashion, almost like a flock of geese. As the vessels get closer, I literally slap myself in the face to make sure I'm not dreaming. The vessels are wooden and they look like Viking vessels that haven't been used in hundreds of years. The vessels are now within a mile. I think to myself that it's impossible that anything survived that storm, let alone wooden sailing vessels. I run into my room to search my room for binoculars. I run back outside and I say, "Oh my effing God," as I see thousands of men dressed in nothing more than animal furs. All the men on the vessels have the look in their eyes like they are coming to kill everything possible. I start to panic. My whole body starts to shake. I know these vessels are from a different era. I have studied sailboats my whole life. These vessels haven't been made like this in well over 500 years. I don't know if the storm thrusted them out of a time warp or something. The vessels are now within a couple 100 yards. I can see the countless men gripping their axes and swords. I have to do something. The island is too small for me to hide. I get a quick thought that pops into my head. What if I get the portable generator and plug in my circular saw and my battery operated radio? I'll quickly gather those things and run to the beach. I'll blast the radio and demonstrate the use of the circular saw. Hopefully these marauders will realise that I'm the only person on this island, and hopefully they'll be mesmerised by my unworldly gadgets. About 10 of the vessels hit the sand, and I see about 40 of the men exit each vessel and start to come towards me. As I hold the circular saw with both my hands, all I can hear is the heavy beating of my heart. I completely tune out the radio and the circular saw. I'm about 5'8" and 150 pounds, with all of my clothes on. As the men approach me, I can see their leader make his way towards the front of the other men. He has to be close to 6 feet tall and 6 inches in height. He has a weathered, beaten face and is nothing more than muscles. His long, dirty, blonde hair goes midway down his back, and he is even wearing elk or reindeer fur. He is the closest thing to the real-life He-Man that I have ever seen. There must be close to 400 men behind him who are shorter than the leader, but they all have the same rugged demeanour. At this point, I wish I could just die. Nothing in life has prepared me for this moment. The leader looks at my circular saw and stares at it. He tilts his head from side to side as he tries to make sense of it. I don't know if he can distinguish the sound from the generator, from the sounds of the radio, from the sounds from the circular saw. In an effort to not lose his unwielding attention, I slowly lower the saw towards the ground where a log lays from the storm. I cut the log and I hear gasps from the crowds of men. The leader is overwhelmingly impressed by my gadgets. He even plays with the dials on my radio, where he hears mostly static and an occasional broadcast from St. John's. He turns around and tells his men something, and then the men disperse as they search the rest of the island. All of the men try to get a closer look at my gadgets as they pass by, and the leader barks something at them, which I assume means go away or mind your own business. I hand the circular saw over to the leader and I demonstrate to him to hold the button down to get the saw to work. He takes the saw and he seems completely enchanted, like a kid using a remote control car for the first time. He then cautiously starts to cut branches of wood to the point where he just doesn't want to stop. Minutes go by and I show him how to refuel the generator. I can tell that he has never seen anything mechanically or gas powered before. He puts both of his hands on the generator as it vibrates. I demonstrate that the saw has to be plugged into the generator in order for it to work. I think I found the one thing that can tame these savages. The leader looks much more interested in using these new gadgets than on killing me. The other men start to return back to the leader. He says something to them in a harsh language that I can't pinpoint its origins. 4 of the men pick up the gadgets that I demonstrated for them and they load them onto the leader's sailing vessel. The leader looks at me and drops his battle axe on the ground, as I assume is a gift for me. Then all the men get in their sailing vessels and head out into the Atlantic away from Newfoundland. I stand on the beach completely overwhelmed. Every ounce of emotion has left my body as I try to make sense of what just happened. I never believed in UFOs or even God, but now I'm second guessing everything. The next day, Mr. Braddock, the superintendent of all the lighthouses on the eastern shores of Canada, comes to inspect the damage to the island. He sees the damage to the lighthouse and knows that it will take weeks for it to become functional again. He is the first person I have seen or talked to regarding the Viking invasion of the island. He listens in complete disbelief as I tell him about the sailing vessels and the men on board. He thinks I have a concussion from the storm. Then I show him the battle axe, and he is completely enthralled by the old world craftsmanship. He thinks it was stolen from a museum. Mr. Braddock tries to get me to leave the island and get medical attention, but I insist that I'm fine and I remain on the island. I have made several paintings from what I observed, and I know I'll never receive credit for saving Newfoundland from a Viking invasion. No cars come in or out of the Oak Mountain housing development. I live in a Philadelphia suburban area that is made up of mostly newer housing developments. The area was mostly made up of farmland until the early 1980s, when a countless amount of new housing developments sprung up. In the early 2000s, I was newly married and still living in the city, watching the news and seeing more and more crime in the area where I lived. Motivated by my wife Gina and I flee to the suburbs. We were both young, in our early 20s, so our budget of what we could afford was limited. We were going to have kids someday, so we wanted a kid-friendly area with a good school district. We found our house in Bucks County, located adjacent to the housing development. We figured that we had the advantages of having a housing development that contained 200 plus homes located less than a quarter of a mile from us, without having all the restrictions related to living in the housing development, like having a strict homeowners association. The development is called Oak Mountain and is made up of non-brick composite siding row homes. There are no security gates to get into the development, and it has two entrances, where one is close to the small town of Fog Creek on one side and to a public trail on the other side. We had our daughter Grace a couple years later after moving into our new home. We could see one of the access roads to the housing development from our house, where the public trail runs through our backyard. One of the things that Gina and I were discussing is how we never see a car entering or leaving the development. Gina and I had decided to walk through the development on one spring afternoon, which was about 2 years since we have moved to our new house. We pushed Grace up the hill in the stroller. We were astonished by just how many houses there were and how we never heard a peep coming from the people living in Oak Mountain. The development went around in a circle and the houses had a late 1970s look to them. Though there seemed to be over 200 houses packed into the development, not one of them were for sale. When we were looking for a house in this area, which was odd. As Gina and I continued to walk, everything seemed orderly and precise. There was no trash on the ground. The grass was nicely cut. The houses were well maintained, and it had a nice pool and playground area. But on the flip side, there were no kids playing in the pool or in the playground. As we continued to walk the circle, we would see an occasional person outside of their respective homes. We got the look from people that we were unfamiliar to them, but they still waved to us. We finished the circle and went back home. Gina said to me, "Wasn't it odd that we didn't see one kid?" I responded, "Yeah, but we will go again next Sunday and I'm sure there will be kids out playing. Maybe they were involved in some type of sporting activities or something." Then Gina said, "Don't you think that's unlikely, considering that we haven't seen a car enter or exit the development?" I responded, "Yes, considering that it seemed like each house had a car and the nearest supermarket isn't just a block away." Gina said, "Yeah, that's a little odd." The next Sunday came around and we decided to take the same walk through the development. As we walked, everything seemed like it was the previous week. It was almost like everything was exactly the same people in the same locations, the same cars were parked in the same spots, and still there were no kids out playing. When we got back home, Gina said, "I feel like we just went through a movie set where all the actors performed their precise roles as they did last week, like the movie with Jim Carrey, where I can't think of its name at this moment." I responded, "Yeah, but the people in Oak Mountain didn't come across as friendly like they did in that movie. Yeah, they waved at us, but I definitely got the vibe like they knew we didn't belong there." Gina responded, "Yeah, I felt the same way. You know what's odd? Growing up in Philadelphia, I didn't know the people 7 houses down from me or what they looked like, so why would we stand out, considering the amount of houses located in the development? I said, yeah, I agree. It was almost like we were being watched. Gina replied, yes, that's the exact vibe I got, that the people who were outside were intentionally placed to have constant eyesight on us. I responded, yeah, that's odd. We both got the same vibe. Another thing I noticed from the people we saw was they looked kind of homely. There was no level of sophistication to them or something. It's like when we watch the TV show The Duggars, where everybody seems just a little bit off, whether it's their hairstyles or the clothes they were wearing. Gina responds, yes, I agree with everything you're saying, but still the oddest thing is that there wasn't one kid out playing. We should go back next week. I responded, yes, eventually we'll have to see a kid. We know it's not a retirement community based on their property tax codes. I couldn't sleep this Wednesday night because of the thoughts I was having about the Oak Mountain housing development. We thought it would be a nice place for Grace to meet kids to play with, and we still haven't seen one kid yet. As I laid down in bed, I heard a truck slow down in front of our house. I got out of bed and noticed it was turning into the housing development. The truck was about the size of a large U-Haul truck. I thought to myself, this is the first vehicle that I have ever observed going into the development, and it's 2 a.m. in the morning. The following Sunday came around and Gina and I decided to take the same walking route through the development. We saw the same lady watering her plants outside her house. Gina nudged me and said, I'm going to talk to this lady. I said, okay. I got a weird vibe when Gina said that, almost like we were on the set of a live TV show and we were about to interrupt a scene. Gina said to the woman, hello, what a beautiful day. The woman responded, yes, lovely, isn't it? I picked up a hint of a Pennsylvanian Dutch accent when she said that. Then Gina said, this is my husband Ted and my daughter Grace. The woman seemed like she was starting to get uncomfortable. I noticed her start to look around, almost like she didn't want to be caught saying the wrong thing to us. Gina reached into the stroller and picked Grace up. Toddlers are good icebreakers, and I knew that was Gina's mindset. The woman got real uncomfortable when Grace was taken out of the stroller and held by Gina. It was like watching someone who was deathly afraid of dogs. I didn't know if it was because of Grace or the fact that we weren't supposed to be engaging with this woman. The woman awkwardly responded, oh yes, she's pretty, please excuse me. Then she rushed into her house. I have never encountered anything like that in my life. It was like we were Nazis marching through her town, where she didn't want to say the wrong thing. But I think it wasn't us that she was concerned with, but rather it was her fellow neighbours. Gina did the same thing to 2 other people who were in front of their houses. We pretty much got the same response with each person we encountered. Also, This time I noticed we were being watched by people inside their homes. I could see them peeking through their blinds. Gina and I both got home, and Gina said, "Oh my God, what kind of messed up crap was that?" I responded, "I really don't have an explanation for what we encountered." For some odd reason, none of the people wanted to interact with us in any way. It was like we were taking them out of their comfort zone or something. Gina said, "What do we do?" I said, "I really have no idea. We never thought of a scenario like this when we moved into this house. I get that not everyone is going to like us, but there is a whole community up there that is living in their own world. I saw a truck pull into their development last Wednesday." Gina said, "You did? Why didn't you say anything?" I responded, "Don't you think it's extremely odd that a truck pulling into a housing development is breaking news to us?" Gina said, "Yes, but we haven't seen anyone pull in or out since we moved here." Gina said, "Yeah, I agree." I responded, "I'll set my alarm for this coming Wednesday to see if the truck comes through again." Wednesday came and I didn't need the alarm because I was already up. I heard the same truck come by a little after 2 a.m. I decided to rush out the door to see why it had pulled into the development. I grabbed a pair of binoculars because I knew I was going to be noticed if I got too close. As I walked up into the development, I dropped to one knee when I saw the truck stopped in the middle of the development. With my binoculars, I could see countless people lined up behind the truck. Each person was handed a box that I assumed had food in it. I figured that I had seen enough, but I really wanted to see where the truck came from. So I hurried home and I got into my car with the intent to follow the truck. Fortunately, the truck exited the same way it entered, through the development, which was close to my house. I followed the truck to its warehouse in Reading, Pennsylvania, called Budget Beef. I have never heard of this company before, so I researched it online when I got home. From the research, I discovered that it's a meat distribution center with its main operation in Mexico. Other than providing low-cost meat, I couldn't find much more about the company. When Gina woke up, I filled her in about the truck I followed and the people waking up early in the morning to get their meat rations. We felt it was best to go back through the development again on Sunday. Hopefully this time the people would feel more comfortable towards us and be more inviting. As we entered the development this time, every house was watching us, and they weren't hiding behind their blinds. The word must have gotten out that we were coming through. Now, every Sunday, I started to sweat in fear. I really didn't know if we were going to be bum rushed, where everyone would run out of their house at once towards us. I felt like we were inmates being sized up the first day walking into prison. Gina started to cry. I think she was just overwhelmed with fear and rejection. The people we had seen the previous week looked at us angrily. Then they quickly walked inside their house. Gina said, "What did we do? Why is everyone watching us? Why did that woman look at us like we murdered her kid?" I said, I really have no clue. No one knows us here, so I don't know why they're responding to us this way. I got caught up in the moment, seeing Gina upset, and I made the bold decision to go knock on somebody's door. It wasn't a hard decision to pick a house, because every single one of them were watching us. The closest house we were by, I saw a man in his 40s watching us through his window, so I decided to knock on his door. As I knocked on his door, the man didn't come to open the door. I said, I know you're in there. I saw you watching us. The man yelled out, get the fuck out of here now. I said, sir, it's just me, my wife and my daughter. Gina heard the exchange and started to cry. I didn't blame her. I walked as intimidating as possible, almost like I was trying to thwart off a bear attack by looking opposing. I was completely confused. We really weren't that far from a major city. It wasn't like we were in the Bible Belt or something. When we got home, Gina cried for an hour straight. When she calmed down, we started to talk. I said, I don't know, honey. It's not us. When we walk through Philadelphia, everyone doesn't watch us through their windows. There is something truly odd going on in that development. I don't know why they didn't put a gate up with a sign saying, go away. It's almost like they don't want to seem like a cult, but that's exactly what they are. Besides seeing no kids, I haven't seen anyone over the age of 60 watching us through their windows. Gina said, I just don't know. The next day, things got even odder. The public trail behind our house was filled with people from the development. Considering in the last 2 years I haven't seen anyone come or go from the development, and now there's about 30 people walking in a continual loop, going back and forth in our backyard. I knew they were sending us a message, but I didn't know how far they were willing to go. They just continually walked all day long for 2 days straight. It's now Wednesday, and I was going to watch the delivery truck again. This time I waited till all the lines had cleared and all the people received a box. Then once again the oddness was taken to a new level. I saw 2 men and a woman, each about 60 years old, climb into the back of the truck. Then to top it off, I saw a young woman place a newborn infant in the truck. The baby was just placed on the floor of the truck bed, and then the woman just walked away. It was just like she dropped off her old clothes off to Goodwill. Nobody waved to the people as they got into the truck. Each person received their box of meat that they just went into their houses. The truck driver slid the rear door of the bed down with the people inside. I hurried back to my house to follow it again, and it went to the Budget Beef warehouse plant in Reading. The truck drove into the warehouse, and then the warehouse closed its doors. I was completely baffled by those people who loaded themselves onto the truck and then were brought to the warehouse to include the newborn baby. Then the next day, once again, things were taken to the next level. This time each person who was walking behind our house actually came and knocked on our door. It was like each person was given a script to read. The first person violently knocked on our front door, and when I opened the door, I saw that it was a man in his 30s. I said, "Can I help you?" The man, in the most angriest tone a person could have, responded, "My bike is missing and I saw you walking past my house." I said, "Sir, walking past your house doesn't mean I had anything to do with your bike missing." Then I said, "Please leave now." The next person knocks on the door and accused us of walking on their lawn. Then the next person accused us of taking their dog. Then the next person accused us of taking their mail. This went on for about 3 hours. My head was spinning. Gina had taken Grace upstairs and was crying in our room. I had decided to drive to the local police station. I walked into the police station and there was a middle-aged man named Officer O'Grady sitting at the counter. He greeted me and I told him that I had a concern. He said, "What can I help you with?" I said, "My wife, my young daughter and I have been walking through the Oak Mountain housing development. There's a lot of strange things going on up there. There's no kids, there's no geriatric population. Everyone watches you through their windows as you walk by their house. I haven't seen an automobile go in or out besides a meat delivery truck early in the morning on Wednesdays." We tried to introduce ourselves, and initially they literally ran from us in horror. Earlier today, I had 3 hours worth of countless people accusing us of damaging or stealing anything that you can imagine. What the hell is going on in that development? The police officer paused and said, "Where are you from, son?" "Philadelphia." I responded, "Yes, my wife and I moved into the house below the development just over 2 years ago." The police officer said, "Do you think any of the people living in the Oak Mountain development came walking by your house and tried talking to you when you lived in Philadelphia?" I responded, "No, they probably didn't." The police officer responded, "So just because you moved here, you expect them to welcome you with open arms? They are a sect of the Mennonite community that has been rooted here before this country was a country. I expect you to leave them alone, like how they left you alone when you lived in Philadelphia." I was completely flabbergasted, but what was I going to do? They hadn't committed a crime, or at least I didn't think they did. I went home, completely defeated. I felt like a complete loser, being rejected by the community above our house and not being able to get any assistance from the police. I looked through the back window and I didn't see anyone on the trail, so I decided to just walk back and forth by myself. I just couldn't stop crying because I didn't want to live in this house anymore. After about an hour and a half of walking, some unknown elderly man approached me. He saw me crying from a distance and said, "It's a nice evening, isn't it?" I said, "Yeah, I guess." He then asked me, "May I ask what's bothering you?" Being I'm from the city, I typically don't open up to strangers, but at this point I really have nothing to lose. I say it's this house, and more so that development, as I pointed up towards the development. He said, "Oh, up there, I would stay away from there." I said, "Why? You know something about them?" He said, "I grew up in the Mennonite community in Fog Creek. That's where the damned go." I responded, "What do you mean by damned?" He said, "We have strict beliefs, and if one chooses not to abide by them, then they are forced to live a life up there or leave our community altogether. It's considered a final judgment, if someone is able to live up there and follow the community's strict rules, then there's a possibility they can be saved from damnation. I responded, "That's the craziest thing I've ever heard. I've seen no children or elderly people, though they have cars parked outside their homes. I've never seen any of them drive in or out. I've only seen a truck that comes from the budget beef warehouse, which comes on Wednesdays." The man said, "I can tell from your accent that you're not from around here. You're used to the city religions like Catholicism. Around here, the only thing that matters is religion and God. Everything you see up there in that development is a facade. None of them drive because they're not allowed to. They're not allowed to talk to anyone or even have their own children." And then said, "Well, what happens to the babies and the elderly?" The man responds, "What happens to the baby is up to the mother. Typically the pregnant mother and others arrive to the community on Wednesdays by the same truck that you have been seeing, like the elderly. The new mothers have a choice of what they want to do. The baby is considered forever damned, so the mother can either leave on her own from the community with her baby, or she could just put the baby on the back of the truck. The same thing with the people my age or even younger. They can leave the community on foot on their own, or they can complete the last process to hopefully save themselves." I responded, "What do you mean, save themselves? And the babies are forever damned? And how do you know all this information?" The man responded, "Well, I was one of those people who decided to walk away rather than get on the truck. I have no education or money, and supposedly I'm damned to hell, but this is the decision that I made, and that's the decision they made. You're thinking with your ideals and your logic, but it's a big country out there." I responded, "So what happens to the people on the truck when they get to the budget beef warehouse distribution centre?" The man responded, "Well, let me tell you a story. My parents didn't have much money when I was growing up. We had a dairy cow which was born about the same time I was, and I had named her Millie. I grew up with the cow and it produced a lot of milk, butter and cheese for us. When both Millie and I turned 10, Millie got old and stopped producing milk. Then my dad set me aside and said Millie is ready for the next journey in her life, so he took Millie into the barn and shot her. Then he butchered Millie. Millie was too old and her meat was too tough, so my mother made a stew from her which lasted about a month. When I was eating the stew, I wasn't eating Millie because her soul had already left her body. My head is really spinning at this moment. I'm thinking to myself, is he implying that people who get onto the truck are voluntarily being brought to a slaughterhouse to later be consumed by people in their community, to include the newborn babies? I responded, so what do I do now? The man responded, do what everybody else does. Your sneakers are made in China by some 12-year-old kid that is making $3 a day. Are you going to go to China and fix the system? You know you're not, because that's normal in their culture, and this is normal here in this culture. So either you accept your solitude here, or you move back to where you came from. I said, okay, thank you for your advice. I'll have to discuss this with my wife. When I got home, I sat down and contemplated everything. I figured that prior to going into the Oak Mountain development, both Gina and I didn't know what was going on up there, and the people in the development had just left us alone. So moving forward, we won't pry into their lives, and in turn, hopefully, they will leave us alone again. Our daughter is 10 now, and we never moved back to Philadelphia. Our neighbours up the mountain don't bother us, and we don't bother them. The truck that comes on Wednesdays uses the other entrance and exit by the town of Fog Creek. From the commotion that we stirred up, we have received 5 newborn babies over the years that reluctant mothers had decided to place on our front doorstep versus on the truck. We in turn had dropped the newborn babies off at the local hospital with no questions asked because of Pennsylvania's safe haven law. And that's it for tonight, my little hellhounds. Don't forget to subscribe and click the like button, as this really helps the channel. And if you have any scary stories you want narrated on the channel, then please submit them to r/homeofscares and follow me on Twitter at homeofscares. Now, good night, my little hellhounds.